Tonight, Swamp Thing decides to end its series with what can only be described as a metatextual bang. Green Arrow's creative team switches out and unfortunately does not take Felicity Smoke with them, and Grayson spends multiple pages discussing the merits of Dick Grayson's ass. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 183 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host and it is month number 40 by my count. I mean, obviously there was Villains Month, Futures End Month, Zero Month. Those don't count as months though, because shut up. But this is month number 40, and for a lot of people who aren't as familiar with the New 52, they'll hear that and say, yeah, so whatever. But here's the deal, people. Month number 40 is where the New 52 ends. Officially. Like, legally speaking. So, there was a little branding that was put on the books that says the New 52. It's called an insignia. After month 40, we go into Convergence, which, trust me, we'll get there. And then they didn't bring the insignia back. The New 52 branding stopped there. And we went into what was called the DCU era, YOU. And a lot of people would consider that the end of the New 52, but I'm not. Obviously, I consider New 52 to be this period before everything got a new number one again with Rebirth, so we're going to go up until there. But I will say that this marks a major milestone where this could be the end. Like, we are within spitting distance of the end of the New 52 here, and being able to say we got through the first 40 months, that's actually an accomplishment, and I'm very proud of that. So regardless of whether or not you're going to give me this, I'm taking it. Anyway, books that are coming out. I do have one little thing I need to say, but for the most part, it's just going to be a normal month. So we have, in no particular order, Detective Comics, Grayson, Harley Quinn, Green Lantern, Aquaman and the Others, Earth 2, Green Arrow, Justice League 3000, Infinity Man and the Forever People, Lobo, Swamp Thing, and our 3 weeklies, Batman Eternal, Futures End, and World's End. So, out of those, we have final issues for Swamp Thing, and Earth 2, and Aquaman and the Others. Those are all final issues. We have the ending of arcs for pretty much all of them. I think Infinity Man is the only one who makes it out with not being the ending of arc. But one thing I do need to mention, and this is my own personal mistake that I've been making here, is Earth 2. Turns out that book has been being written, and sorry, not Earth 2, Earth 2 World's End, has been written by Johnson, Wilson, and Bennett, who I have credited on every issue. But it turns out that since issue 18, Cullen Bunn has also been a writer on that, and I just never double-checked to see if the writers changed. I assumed it was the same throughout. So I'm going to start crediting Cullen Bunn with this week's issue, but apologies for anyone who was so deeply invested in the Earth 2 World's End section of the show, which I think may be all of none of you. But yeah, so that's that. It's, like I said, standard show. Not really anything more I need to say. There is a little bit of news I'm going to throw out at the end of this episode, but you can catch it at the beginning of the next one if you're really not that plussed about it. It's just a way that I'm making my life easier, which I know you don't care about. Anyway, enough of my rambling, enough of my talks. Let's get into it, starting with the Bat books. Detective Comics number 40, written by Francis Manapul and Brian Buccellato, art by Francis Manapul. So last issue, Bullock and Batman went out to go to figure out the backstory for Anarchy and also, I guess, Mad Hatter, and then Mad Hatter was about to get killed by a bunch of Anarchy goons. And we open up this issue with Mad Hatter getting killed by a bunch of Anarchy goons. I mean, he's being beaten up severely, and they're basically saying, like, hey, you killed them all, Jervis Tetch, they were kids, we were kids, We were supposed to trust you, and you took advantage of that. Now it's time to pay. And Batman's watching this from above. Bullock's been stabbed at this point. He's like, Bullock, I'm going to patch up your wound, and then I got to go deal with this thing, okay? So we need to figure out the source of the transceiver. And he's talking to Alfred at the same time, and Alfred's like, oh, so you think there's something more to these masks? And it's like, yeah, the masks have some sort of Mad Hatter tech in them. I figured that out. Don't ask how. So he patches up Bullock and says, here, take a communicator and just stay put. So he sees the Anarchy goons beating up the Mad Hatter, and he's like, I can't let them kill him, so all right. And he full-on Dark Knight Returns out of a window, comes down, starts attacking all of Anarchy's guys. Meanwhile, back in the city, everything's going nuts. Like, all of the Anarchy people that are wearing the masks are attacking the police, and like it's about to be this whole big thing. And Alfred's coming in saying like, hey, you need to figure out where that communicator transponder thing is ASAP, Batman, because you do not have time for this. And then Bullock, he sits up and he's like, I might be missing a lot of blood, but I think I can help with this. Tell me what I can do. And so he guides Bullock down the stairs and says, it should be right to your right. And he's like, no, there's a wall here. And Alfred's like, no, there's a communicator there. And as he's staring at this wall, he gets jumped by an Anarchy goon and then manages to flip around and tackle the Anarchy goon through the wall. So as everyone's attacking Batman, and they get like orders to do so, Batman launches out some smoke and then goes in and attacks the main Anarchy guy, who is here, and he is slightly different looking, and he's like, I know who you are. So as Batman is doing this, Bullock's like, hey, I'm in this back room, but I don't know what a transponder looks like. What am I looking for here? Batman's like, you'll know when you see it. And he's like, that's not helpful. So again, back in the city, things are about to go hectic. Things are going crazy. It's a like standoff between a giant Anarchy group and a bunch of SWAT police force. And then this one guy who is wearing an Anarchy mask, but it looks homemade. It doesn't look like it's actually a real one, or it's been cracked and fixed up later. He comes out with a megaphone and just like, hey, don't attack the police, guys. This isn't what freedom means. You shouldn't do that. They're just doing their jobs. They're trying to protect Gotham. It's not a thing to. Don't worry about police brutality. They're actually good cops. And then all of a sudden, a Molotov just comes flying overhead, and they start attacking each other anyway, or so it seems. So Bullock eventually comes across one of Mad Hatter's hats, and he's like, this is the transponder. I can feel it buzzing, but I don't... You're asking me for a frequency in order to stop it. I don't know what the frequency... It's a hat. So he looks over it, and he sees a little note in the top that says, in this style, 10/6. And he's like, 10/6. Try that. Try 106. And so they put in that frequency, and Alfred's on the other side like, nope. That ain't it. You got anything else? And Bullock's like, okay, let me try something. And he puts on the hat. Meanwhile, as all this is going on, Batman's beating up the main Anarchy guy, and he calls him out. He says, your name is Sam Young. You are a liar and a killer. None of this is like a real revolution. You don't believe in stuff. It's all just so you can get revenge against not only Mad Hatter, but the police. And he gives into this whole backstory of how his sister was in this home, and she was named Alice, and Alice was being abused and eventually killed by Mad Hatter, and the police didn't do a damn thing to stop it, despite the fact that he was saying, like, oh, this is happening and whatnot. So also, the masks are modeled off her face so that she'll never be forgotten. It's a whole thing. But eventually, like I said, Bullock puts on the mask, and as all the other goons are coming in to attack Batman, because both him and Sam are stuck under some rubble, they all start taking off their masks and saying, like, oh, hey, it's Batman. Batman's cool. And they all start helping Batman up from under the rubble. And he's like, oh, cool, yeah, your minds are free. You were being mind controlled and doing all of that. All of the revolution, all of the anxieties and fears for your futures and unhappiness with the system, it was all mind control. So we cut to later. Bullock's in the hospital getting fixed up. Detective Yip is there, who is apparently still suspended, but she's going to get her badge back soon. We see Lonnie Mashin, who I think was the chill guy that Batman was okay with. He gets handed a box of his stuff as he's being let out of the hospital, and inside is one of the Anarchy masks. So I don't know if that's implying, like, he eventually turns back into anarchy. Like, he takes the role. We see Sam is locked up, I think, in probably Arkham. Doesn't say specifically, but it's like, yeah, no, it was just to get against the police. All of his stuff was a lie. None of it was true. He's just another murderous lunatic. And then Alfred's like, what about Mad Hatter? And Batman's like, yeah, he's still crazy and he's gonna kill again. So let's just keep him locked up as well. And we see Alfred and Batman seemingly taking down Christmas lights off of the Wayne estate, which, like, 3 months too late, my dudes. And they're talking about, like, yeah, you know, all of the data that was erased, Barbara's on that, she's trying to get on it, blah, blah, blah. And Batman basically says, it's a good thing that everyone was mind-controlled, because I don't know if I'm actually capable of solving the problems that they are right to be angry about if they were actually that angry about it. And Alfred's like, oh, but don't you see, Master Wayne? They helped you. They got you out of that rubble. That's humanity's true face. They all want to help each other. They don't want to hurt people. Maybe one day they won't need a Dark Knight. And Batman says, maybe, but not yet. And it goes back out as Batman. And that's the issue. Okay. Look. Call me politically charged, if you will. But I think that ending this issue by saying, no, people are generally happy with the state of affairs of things and aren't angry enough to riot unless they're being mind controlled, kind of just feels like a bit of too much optimism. It's a bit too much of like, yeah, no, guys, cool down. Everything's going fine. You just need to stop being angry. Like, oh, okay. Here I thought the issue was systemic. But I mean, just focusing on the comic individually, yeah, of course, Batman's not going to wrestle with the entirety of the world's politics. In terms of this particular issue, it's okay. This has been my problem with the Manapul Buccellato run on all of Detective, is that it feels like it adds so many different plot threads, and by the time we hit the end, I don't feel like we really wrapped up any of them. Like, we got that whole other thing with, like, the politician who's doing stuff, and he is mentioned in here as someone who, like, looked the other way and let this stuff happen, but, like, I don't know, it just feels like it's so needless of a plot thread, and it ultimately ends up getting dropped. So it's just a little bit too much, I think, for a month-to-month comic. Maybe if you're reading it in a trade, it would go better, but monthly, it's too much to hold on to mentally, especially when they are all new characters, and a lot of them look pretty similar to each other. So, yeah, I think I'm just a little bit disappointed in this arc overall. I'm gonna say it's a 6.5 for this one, just not quite hitting that for me. Grayson number 8, written by Tim Seeley and Tom King, art by Mikel Janin. So kind of the wrap-up of the first major arc here. We open this issue with Mr. Minos, who is having two, I don't think they're simultaneous conversations, but they're presented back and forth with each other. One of which is him having coffee in a cafe with a mysterious woman we don't get to see, and the other is him talking to Helena in his office. And they're basically saying the same thing. The Mr. Minos is saying the same thing of, mission accomplished. We got all the organs back. We did it. They were delivered yesterday. We got Superman's secret identity, Clark Kent. That's a crazy one. He's a reporter. What a joke. And basically, Minos says, and now my mission is done. That was my mission. I'm happy I did it. And over in the Helena stuff, we see him say, hey, Helena, can I see your crossbow real quick? And she hands it over, and he's like, you know, I had you shoot Grayson the first time you met. It was a dummy, but you didn't know that. And that loyalty to Spiral, that's how I knew you had to go first. And he shoots her in the chest. So we then see some of the girls at the finishing school are watching Dick Grayson do his gymnast stuff for gym class, and they are naming his ass cheeks. The left one is Juan, the right one is Jim. And they're saying, Jim's the best, but Juan could use some comforting, some tender comforting. So as they're watching, all of a sudden, Dr. Nets comes running into the room holding Helena's bloodied body, and she's like, I'm freaking, where's the doctor? He's supposed to be here. And Grayson comes down off the balance beam, sees that she's in trouble, and Helena's like, he missed the vital organ because I always adjust the sight when I put it in my sheath or whatever. holster. And Grayson's like, who did this? What's going on? And she's like, hold on 1 second. And she like struggles and screams and she rips the arrow out, and they're still calling for the doctor. And Grayson's like, hey, it's okay. It's all right. Sorry. Just tell me what's up. And she's like, look, get the students to the shelters. Dr. Netz, you got to fix the comms. And Dick, everyone else is on mission except for you and Agent 1. He's going to go after Agent 1 first. He's in the chapel praying. You got to get to him. And Grayson's like, cool, will do. Who am I looking for? And she's like, Minos. And then passes out. So everyone immediately gets on the things after Grayson tells them, like, yep, if students, all that, do all that, I'm going to the chapel. And Netz is like, wait a minute, if this is Minos, he's going to kick your ass. He is so ahead of everybody. He knows like 1,000 steps ahead. And Grayson just busts out a window saying, do you think I care? So everyone starts doing what they need to do, except for the group of girls who were the same girls from an earlier issue. And they're like, well, we could go back to our shelter, or we could go and join the fight at the chapel. And so they run to get their weapons and masks. Meanwhile, at the chapel, Agent 1 is praying, and Minos comes up with a gun, just like, oh, you never understood, Agent 1. God's just another man with a secret. And Agent 1 just flips around and takes the gun and, like, aims it at his junk and says, all right, you got 3 seconds to tell me if you're being taken over or crazy or something, and I'm going to shoot off your manhood. Then I'm going to wait 3 more seconds and see if you say anything else. And Minos is like, oh, I tried to tell you. And then in from behind is this dark side-esque looking monstrosity named Paragon, who apparently all of those organs were from Paragon, so they just remade him again. And not only that, he has all the powers of the Justice League. So immediately Agent 1 gets thrown against the wall. Grayson manages to get him out of the way of some energy blasts, and he's like, what do you know? And Minos is like, that monster has all the power of the JLA. We're going to die. And Grayson's like, I don't think so. We're not going to die. And he's like, well, that's why you're an idiot. And he's like, damn right I am. So Grayson explains, I fought with the Justice League. I know how they fight, and I also know that each of them has a little bit of a weakness that you can exploit. And he goes through and says, like, Flash, just stay up close combat's where you need to be. Green Lantern, it's all about willpower, so just try to distract him as much as possible. Superman's freeze breath, you got 4.2 seconds to be able to dodge that, so plenty of time to do that. And if Martian Manhunter mind attack happens, you just kind of push through it. That's the most you could do. So he manages to land some solid punches on Paragon, and he's like, oh, it's a good thing he doesn't have Wonder Woman's strength. We never got the, oh, right, that heart, the heart was in the baby, and we never delivered the baby. That was its own thing, one of the best issues of the series. So he's looking around saying, where's the gun? Like, he doesn't have... the heart is open is more or less what he's going for. And they see that the gun is on the other side of Paragon, so there's no way they're going to be able to get to it. When all of a sudden, the girls come in with their crossbows and they end up shooting them at Paragon's face, which distracts him just long enough for Grayson to do a flip in the air, get the gun from the girls, and Agent 1's like, wait a minute, hold on. Agent 8 said you were a horrible shot. And he's like, well, that's the thing about super spies. And he shoots Paragon straight in the chest and says, we lie. So Paragon's down. The girls are still admiring Grayson's ass. And in comes Minos clapping his hands, doing the like, well done. Well, now what are you going to do? I know all of your secrets, and I know that you will not kill. Do you really think that you can keep me quiet, Mr. Grayson? I don't think so. I swear I'll spill all the secrets of the superheroes. And then crossbow bolt through his heart from behind. It's Helena. And she's like, I fixed the sights. So he's out there. However, we then cut to the cafe conversation from the beginning. Turns out this was all a decoy. He's saying like, yeah, no, it's a light composite. It's going to pretend to do the supervillain thing of explaining the whole story and blah, blah, blah. These heroes love to be able to fight those sorts of villains. So I'll just give it to them. They'll think I'm dead, and I'm going to bail out to Ireland. I got a contact over there waiting for me. And the person that he's talking to, this mystery woman, says like, oh yeah, I mean, that works, that sounds good, hold on, let me just fix my lipstick real quick. And he's like, yeah, don't worry about it, we got time. And she says, well, how do you know for sure? And he's like, no, what? He's like, well, that you weren't just being used by Spiral. Like, Spiral didn't want you to do this to begin with. What if they wanted someone like you, because they would know everything about you, to get into the position to bring Grayson in? Because what they really wanted all along was Grayson. And now that you brought him in, you serve no purpose for Spiral anymore. I mean, you ever consider that? And Minos is like, wait a minute, do I know? I know you. How do I know you? And she's like, oh, yep, there it is. And she starts applying her lipstick. And he's like, wait, oh, God, no. You're Agent Zero. You're the one that's a secret rumor. Oh, God, I can't believe it. And he takes off his glasses. He's still got the swirl mask thing on. And he takes off his glasses, and he's like, before you do it, I have to tell you who I am. The reason I did all this, my secrets. And he's about to say his name when all of a sudden a dart hits him square in the center of the face. Turns out the lipstick was just a spy weapon. Shoots him in the face. And she says, honestly, Mr. Whatever, do you really think I care? And that's the issue. Cool. Great. I'm down for it. I think that I think there was a little bit more to Mr. Minos, and I hope it does get explored. Just a little bit. I don't need everything about him to be explored. I don't even think I really want his name. But I think the fact that he had his own machinations, I think something should be able to slip through. I don't care what. I just want to see a little bit more. Because, like, why were there, like, 3 different versions of him? Were they all like composites that they said before? That seems a little bit out of the ordinary, considering that wasn't something anyone else saw. So, yeah, no, I'm super interested in this plot still. It's only getting more interesting. And that's the sign of a good spy thriller mystery thing, is when they wrap up one mystery, the one that takes its place is even more intriguing. So now Spiral is even more in control of Grayson, and they're going to give him enough rope to hang himself. So yeah, I enjoy it. I think I'm going to give this one, I want to say 8. 8 sounds right to me. It's almost at an 8.5, but I think that it goes a little bit too much on Grayson's ass. I think, like, it's funny for the one page. Bringing it back to the second page again at the end seems just a little bit of overkill, but beyond that, it's still a very solid issue. Harley Quinn number 15, written by Amanda Connor and Jimmy Palmiotti, art by John Timms and Chad Hardin. So, last issue, Harley was too busy. She was being pulled in like 100 different directions, and that's kind of still running through this issue. But we also get this thing of a bunch of different women around the New York area and like what they're up to, and it all ties together in the end. But I want to start with the women, despite the fact they are scattered throughout. So we open up with one named Antonia, who is talking to some friends of hers, and they're saying like, oh, how was your date the other night? And he's like, oh, he was a sweet guy, but like he didn't go in for a kiss, he went in for a handshake. And they're like, what? That's crazy. And then he's talking to them about this new website where there's like jobs on the down low, paid under the table, and it's not all freaky sex stuff apparently, but it's got some legitimate stuff on there. And then this dude comes up hitting on them, and she just flips the bird. So second girl we get is at a Indian restaurant where a bunch of people come in, and they are rude and vaguely racist to the waiters and waitresses and stuff, and they only leave $20 on a $60 tip or a $60 bill because they weren't filling up the glasses fast enough. So out comes Shona, who comes out wearing a skull t-shirt and a baseball bat. She gets the download from her grandmother, who is working in the restaurant. The mother says, please don't. Please do not cause more problems here. But instead, she goes outside of these people and says, hey, you disrespected my family and refused to pay the bill. And they're like, we're going to call immigration on you if you mess with us, so back off. And she's like, hey, numbnuts, I was born here and so were my parents. My grandmother's the only one who immigrated. And a blonde woman gets right up in her face and just like, oh, suck it up. And she just headbutts her, gets the bat ready. They're recording her. She smashes their phones with the bat, and they just start running off, trying to get away. And the mother's just like, what have you done? I told you not to do this. You're calling the police. And she's like, hey, I'm taking care of you. Nobody else here is. Not since dad left or died. It's kind of vague. And At that point, the mom's just like, look, we don't need your help. The violence is not the answer. Get out of my restaurant. Go stay somewhere else. I'm not going to risk you staying here. And as she leaves, her grandmother hands her a little bag, supposedly with like money or something in it. And then the last one we get is a Hispanic woman who is on the roof looking for a job. And it's basically just two of her friends come up and say like, oh, hey, what are you doing? And she's saying like, oh, looking for a job. And they yank the laptop away saying that they're going to sell it. She's like, hey, I borrowed that from a friend, give it back. And they're like, oh, yeah, what are you going to do? And she's like, I'm going to throw you over the roof. And he's like, you can't throw me over the roof without losing the laptop. And she's like, want to bet? And she yanks the laptop, throws him over the roof. Luckily, he hits the fire escape, to which she says, yeah, luckily for him. And then the other guy's just like, hey, yeah, I'm just kidding. Sorry. And he bolts. So those are the three girls. Meanwhile, the plot overall is Harley is buying like 170 birds for some reason. She's also picking up a bunch of pet supplies and stuff like that. And as she's leaving, she's like, oh yeah, I need to call Mason, apologize for ditching him last night. She gets hung up on by the mother, and she's passing by this newsstand and sees that there is a massive crime spree all over New York. And it's like, what? This town is going insane. And as she's passing by, she sees that this law firm is on fire. So there are people in the upper windows. She rushes into the building because arson is just going nuts across the city. So nobody's available. She gets inside and she picks up a paper slicer and yanks it off the board to have a weapon. And as she gets into a room, there's a man inside named Tinderbox who's got like a full Firefly sort of outfit. And he's threatening this man who represents the law firm. And he's like, I've been hired by people who are upset with the way you treated them. You took everything from them. Now they're going to take everything from you. And Harley comes in, dodges around this guy's flamethrower, slashes at his legs, and ends up kicking him out the window. And she's like, okay, well, the building's still on fire. So she grabs a fire extinguisher, coats herself in the extinguisher fluid, and starts running up the stairs to the people that are like blocked off by the fire. And they're like, we have nowhere we can go. And so she just pushes them out the window. They land on the body, still alive, of Tinderbox. And then finally Harley jumps down and seemingly like snaps his spine and blood just gushes out of his face. And they're like, thank you, miss. You've saved us all. And she's like, oh yeah, great. Hey, has anyone seen my pet food? And turns out all of it was stolen. So she goes back to the store. She gets more pet food. As she comes back, turns out that somebody did a robbery and crashed their getaway car into the front of her building. And Tony explains the whole thing of just like, oh yeah, no, it's crazy. So she tries calling up Mason. She gets interrupted by work saying that she needs to be in tomorrow. And as she finally gets inside, she finds that Poison Ivy is there, just chilling in her bathtub, saying like, oh, hey, I was just needed to relax. You seem stressed. And she's like, yeah, no, it's crazy out there. She says, how about this? I've been invited to speak at a global warming conference, a climate change one. And they've got all expenses paid. We go down to Miami and we could just spend the weekend crazy. And she's like, but I got to work tomorrow. I can't go. And Ivy basically says, look, my favorite psychologist seems to need to talk to somebody, so let's get takeout and you can share with me. And she basically breaks down like everything that's been going on recently and how she feels like she's responsible for saving the world with all the crime that's going on around here. And Ivy's like, you don't, though? Like, don't bite off more than you could chew there. And she's like, well, you take on the responsibility of all the plants, like, that seems like it's too much. And she's like, yeah, I do what I can. You do that as well. Don't make it too much. And she starts, drinking together with Ivy, sharing all the stuff going on with Mason. And then they have a moment together where like it looks like they're about to get very steamy. And then all of a sudden there's a knock at the door. It's Mason with like 24 red roses. Ivy immediately grabs him saying like, you monster. I'll try to save these as best I can. And Mason's like, look, I heard all the explanations and stuff you gave to my mom. I get it. Everything's forgiven. No big deal. And he's like, do you want to, we still want to go out at some point? And she's like, yeah, totally. But, I'll call you tomorrow. And so he goes off. And Ivy basically made the point earlier on of like, hey, I was thinking about your problem of you being pulled in too many directions. Maybe you need an assistant. Maybe you need someone to like help you get stuff done. And so her and Ivy go to the laptop and they post a help wanted ad, presumably on that same website mentioned at the beginning. And it basically says, need a partner in crime. We will be recruiting 12 different extremely I don't know, just basically more people like Harley, people who are okay with breaking the law for whatever means they see fit, but they will be working on Harley's word. And we see a bunch of people, including all the ones that we met before and some other people that have not yet been introduced, and they're all looking at this ad, and they're saying, awesome, this is going to be great. And then the little beaver toy that she's got around says, oh yeah, sure, what's the worst that could happen? As he imagines himself strapped to a nuke for whatever reason. Okay. It's not a bad issue, but it also feels like completely, okay, I'm going to say completely disjointed, but like that's the whole book, you know? That's since issue 1. Every issue has just felt like, and now we're doing this. I don't know. I was kind of liking the idea of Harley's being pulled in too many directions and using that as the ability to cut some of these plot lines that have been developed, like have her make some choices of, are we sticking with the roller derby thing? Are we sticking with her love life? What about her job at this senior facility home thing? Like, we could cut 1 or 2 of those, but instead it seems like we're solving this by adding more plot lines, and that's a bit much for me to swallow right now. So, all in all, I think I'm still lukewarm, mediocre on this book, but it is kind of dropping a little bit. It's not gaining any favors by introducing more characters and more plot lines that I got to keep track of. So, I think I'm going to give this one, honestly, like a 5.5. The humor also just wasn't there for me. So, yeah, it's pretty middle of the road, but 5.5 is as high as I'll go. Green Lantern number 40, written by Robert Venditti, art by Billy Tan. So last issue we had Hal brought before the Guardians, and basically they were like, hey, look, we're super proud of you for everything you did, but the reputation of the Corps is in the trash, so will you help us fix that? And he's like, I got an idea. So this issue picks up in the headquarters of the Green Lantern Corps inside the evidence vault, and we see a mysterious figure. It's definitely Hal, as he's moving in, and he is getting some mysterious weapon out of a specifically secure vault, and it's a gauntlet, a glove. We find out later it is the glove of Krona, so it does something. And we see Hal is putting it on, and in walks Kilowog, who says, like, yeah, this is how it's going to go. This is what you want to do. I've been with you since the first day you showed up here, and now you want to be a traitor, so let's get it on. And they're ready to fight. And we cut back to earlier, where we see the Guardians are saying, like, oh yeah, by the way, worlds are being turned to stone. That's a big deal. Maybe we should put in our final gambit. And all the other Guardians are like, no, it's too soon. We can't do that. But you know, we don't really have any other choice here. So for right now, that we must act. And then we cut over to Kilowog, who has made some sort of disgusting dish as he's presenting it to the rest of the Corps, and they're just like, I've got to do literally anything else. And he sits there looking all sad, just like, oh, well, if I cooked it for someone of my species, they'd like it. And in comes Hal, and Hal's not wearing a Green Lantern getup. He's just in t-shirt and jeans, and Kilowog pours him a bowl. And he's like, yeah, you know, my brother and I would always eat wings and watch a game together. The dinner time's about togetherness. And you and me, Kilowog, we're a family. That's what the Green Lantern Corps has done for us. And he takes a bite, and it's absolutely disgusting, but he swallows it anyway. And as he's saying all this stuff about, like, we're family, Kilowog's like, you're talking like you're retiring. And he's like, no, I'm not retiring, but I am leaving. And Kilowog's like, BS, you could never leave. And he's like, no, look, I need to help heal the Corps. And to do that, everyone out there thinks that the Corps sucks. And you even said it yourself that the Guardians should have been held liable. They should have been on trial. And he's like, yeah, but they were killed. Like, I would have liked that, but ultimately that's not what shook out there. And I was like, yeah, but this is still their Corps. Because they weren't able to be punished, everyone in the universe still sees this version of the Corps as their own. They need a sacrificial lamb. We need a scapegoat. I think that should be me, because I am the leader of the Corps. You put me on trial, you show that I am responsible for this stuff, and then the Corps can begin to fix its reputation. And Kilowog's like, did the Guardians put you up to this? Because this is really stupid. And he's like, no, they don't know anything about it. This is what I need to do. And Kilowog's like, why not just go? Why tell me? And he's like, because I need help. I need one person to know the truth about what's happening here so that way I can make this believable, more or less. And him and Kilowog shakes hands, and he's just like, there's no forgiveness for this. I don't like it, but I'll do it. And so we cut back to the evidence vault, and Kilowog's like, all right, your move. What do you want? And he's like, don't try to talk me out of it, Kilowog. I've made my mind up. And he's like, oh, no. You throw that first punch, and there's no turning back. And he uses the Glove of Krona to hit Kilowog in the face with some energy, and he's just like, it's Krona's Gauntlet. I may mess that up, but Krona's Gauntlet, and he's just like, oh, yeah, you walk out of here with that, and then nobody's going to think you're on the side of good anymore. So essentially the next big part is just a big fight scene, but it does boil down to Kilowog saying, like, look, I trained you. And even if you're the leader of the Corps, I still feel responsible for you. So if you want to go out there, put a target on your back to literally the entire universe, coming out as a traitor against the Green Lantern Corps, I'm going to make sure you're prepared. And the only way to do that is if you get through me. And so they just continue fighting more and more. And Hal eventually gets back into like Green Lantern Corps outfit, and he's throwing these punches, and he's like laying the smackdown on Kilowog. And finally, Kilowog's just laying on his back. He's bloodied, he's beaten, and he's like, I gotta give it to you, Hal. You're the best hero I ever knew. And Hal's like, oh, God, oh, geez, I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean this. And he's like, nah, don't go soft on me. You got what you wanted to get out of here. Beat it, you poozer. And he says, and by the way, I let you win. So Kilowog passes out, and Hal's like, oh, and he props him up, gives him one last hug before he goes. But as he does so, all the alarms were going off for breaking into the evidence vault. We see a bunch of other Green Lanterns come up and say, step away from Krona's Gauntlet. And they see it's Hal, and they're like, wait, hold on. That doesn't... Why is Kilowog beaten up? Why are you wearing the gauntlet? What's going on here? And he starts to fly out, and they're all just start shooting Green Lantern energy at him, trying to stop him. He eventually uses the gauntlet to bust out of the top of the evidence vault and starts flying off planet. The Lanterns are like, Mogo, stop him, use some gravity. And they're like, what? It's Hal, though. And it's like, yeah, arrest him. And so Mogo tries pulling them down in the gravity, and he's fighting against it. He's flying as hard as he can. He's like, oh, I'm not your leader anymore, Mogo. I'm on my own. And he casts off the Green Lantern uniform, and using an especially strong willpower, blasts away from Mogo. And Salak is like, hey, Ring, locate Green Lantern Jordan. And they're like, oh, the ring's inside of his locker. Like, he's not wearing a ring. And it's like, okay, well, that's it then. Hal Jordan is officially gone. And we see the Guardians looking on, being like, well, that's the end of his tenure. He is no longer a Green Lantern. And now, any trial he faces, he's on his own. So, yeah, bold new era, they claim here at the bottom. Okay. I mean, look, I think I'm all right with it in a conceptual sense, in that I like the idea of the renegade. I like the idea of, okay, he's gone off and he's taken the burden. He's not actually gone parallax like evil, but everyone thinks he did so that the Green Lantern Corps can heal. However, my problem therein comes with, eventually we got to put this genie back in the bottle. Eventually we have to clear his name. And I don't see how that's possible without undoing the goodwill of the Corps again. You know, like it's one or the other. Either the Corps just pulled this wool over the universe's eyes to try to convince them they were good again and everyone gets pissed again, or he stays gone forever. And considering that even as I'm recording this, he's definitely not out of the Corps, yeah, I guess that's just part of serialization. You gotta just accept that some things are eventually going to end back up to status quo. But like, this is one where it definitely feels like, yeah, this is a temporary thing. This isn't one where it's actually just going to stick for a while. So overall, I think this is a solid 7 for me, but ultimately it does feel very sudden, very quick to make this decision where it could have been like a whole arc to get here. So it's all right, just not great. Green Arrow number 40, written by Ben Sokolowski, Andrew Kreisberg, and art by Daniel Sampere. So last issue we had the posse, the Green Arrow's team, which consists of a bunch of people that are clearly Green Arrow people, and then also Batman and Lex Luthor. And Katana, I think, is there, but she's like honorable at this point. So we see that they are attacking the King Tower building, whatever you want to call it, his business, and all the security guards are coming off saying like, oh, stand firm, protect the king at all costs. And in comes the team, and they make it very obvious very quick that what they need to do is hack into his stuff, which just requires Felicity to get close to his personal computer, and they're too far away outside, so they got to try to get in. And we see Arsenal. It's just like, hey, I still don't like you, but I'd rather you be alive than dead. And it was like, all right, sure, why not? Diggle's running in with a gun, trying to get Felicity in closer. We see Lex firing off energy shots. Emiko's doing stuff on her own. One of the women that I didn't recognize before is a redhead. Apparently she is Cupid, and I have this vague recollection of her being someone from like God knows how long ago. So whatever. We then see as Felicity tries to get up to the building, we see that inside is Naomi, who has been buffing up ever since all of this stuff has gone down. And she's like, yeah, no, I'm ripped now, and I take out this guard. So we then see that across town, Batman just went off and did his own thing, and a prosecutor is coming into the office, and the prosecutor's owned by King, and Batman's just like, we're going to bring you evidence to bring down King. You're going to try him. Like, that's going to happen. And he's like, and what if I don't? And Batman steps out of the shadows and he's like, you will. So we then see the security room for the King Tower. The security guards are like, maybe we should give up. That's a lot of people. And they're like, no, remember everything King did for us. We got to try. And they exit the room, and they're immediately like shot by arrows. And Green Arrow's like, all right, tell me how to get to his VIP office suite. And the security guard's like, the elevators are locked. It's 70 stories up. I couldn't turn them on even if I wanted to. And he's like, okay. So then Felicity and Green Arrow get into the elevator shaft. They zoom their way up. As they're walking to the office, Felicity hits a tripwire. Huge explosion, about to throw them off the top of this 70-story building, but wouldn't you know it, he's got a grappling hook arrow, so they manage to survive, and they kick their way into his private office suite. So Felicity goes over to the computer. She's like, okay, it'll just be 30 seconds, no problem. And they start like questioning, like, does he genuinely think he's working for the greater good, or is this all just a power grab? And then in comes, oh god, what's her name? Zena, whatever her name was. And she's like, she's got King on the phone and says, hey, delete the files now, or else Mia, who is with King, is never going to be seen from again. And King is on the phone confirming this, saying like, you got 20 minutes, get down here, so, and bring the hard drive, bring the Smokes hard drive. So at that point, Arrow turns to Zeros and be like, you know we're broken up, right? And then Felicity punches her in the face. So we cut to Oliver going down. Mia's tied up to a post, and she dazedly looks up and says, he's behind you. And then in comes King with a sword and starts swinging it at Oliver. Oliver starts punching him in the face. And ultimately the fight is over in like absolutely no time. And he's got King down on the ground, and he's like, oh, that's you and I are nothing alike, King. We don't share anything in common. And then we see a gun is drawn. It's in Mia's hand, and she shoots Green Arrow. And Oliver's down on the ground, and then she turns the gun to her dad, to King, and he's like, I thought you understood me. I thought you said that we finally had something in common. And she's like, I just wanted a gun. And she pulls the trigger. Only one bullet. King saw this coming, so he's like, yeah, no, you're just like your mother, and that's why I had to kill her too. And then Mia says, oh, but you don't know something. Green Arrow wears Kevlar. And then Oliver does a somersault, sticks an arrow right into King's chest, and it's done. Like, that's it. That's the end of the story. So we get the epilogue here of everyone thought John King was savior of the city. Green Arrow was villainized, but then evidence was presented, and they tried King for all of these massive counts of bribery, and hundreds of people in the public sector just immediately vacated their jobs and went on the run. So everything's kind of chaotic, but at least we know who's left is good. And we see Felicity come running into the Arrow Cave as Diggle and Oliver there saying like, hey, I just got offered a job at Argus. That's totally awesome, right? And then Oliver's just like, well, what if I offered you a job to stay with me? And she's like, would I get a costume? And he's like, that's a yes. So then she says, hey, get out there. There's some sort of robbery or something going on. This city won't save itself. And we got a final splash page of Green Arrow leaping up, ready to continue the fight. Also, they mentioned that Mia is going to be a new sidekick in training, or at the very least is staying with Oliver, and is probably going to be a sidekick in training. So I believe that the next arc is a new writer. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head, but I know that it's a much more well-regarded run than what this one was. This was soulless. This entire bit was just like, we need to tie it into the TV show, so we're just going to keep on doing that over and over again. Like it literally says here, Andrew Kreisberg and Ben Sokolowski, this is on the back cover of the trade, two of the minds behind TV's Arrow and The Flash. And it's like, it feels like a tie-in comic the entire way through. It feels like we don't want to do anything that is actually going to be a plot line, but we also want it to tie in so deeply into the continuity of our show. So yeah, no, it's not good. Ultimately, this issue itself wasn't horrible, but it was just one extended fight scene, and the resolution was as simple as, oh, and then the bad guy got put in jail because everyone realized he was a bad guy. Like, oh, okay, thank you. So yeah, it's like a 6 for me. I've just been so disappointed for like the past 6 months. So yeah, check out whatever Green Arrow's next adventure is. Woo! Aquaman and the Others, number 11, written by Dan Jurgens, art by Lan Medina. So last issue, they beat the villains at their own plan, but the villains in a last-ditch effort launched a nuke that's headed somewhere on Earth, and everyone's fighting out in the middle of an ocean. So they're on an island. It literally is just one extended fight scene of all these people on the team getting their reintroductions again, as if you are just jumping on in this issue, and it's like, oh yeah, prisoner of war is the conscience of the team, and the Yawara is the savageness, and they just go through all that. But they also go through the villains as well and say like, oh, NKV Demon, he's the group Mayhem Savage Assassin, and like, it's just little pair-ups. You see how they fight against each other. Ultimately, in every single one of the matchups, the heroes are winning. They're kind of evenly matched to begin with, but then they ultimately come across as over the top. Worth mentioning is Blaze is going up against Mara, who uses her hydrokinesis and just immediately wipes the floor with him, takes him down in the sea, and be like, well, that's enough of that. We have one of them named Maelstrom is going up against Sae. I don't even know if she got a different, like a team hero name, but Sae is being hit by Maelstrom, and she's just like, wait a minute, I see your future. You have so much more to offer. Get out of here. And Maelstrom's like, oh, okay. She just leaves. KG Beast is going up against the Operative, and he's just like, oh, I am unable to be killed by you. You are weak and pitiful. This is just, you couldn't kill me before, you can't kill me now. And he's just like, want to bet? And Operative throws out a tiny little explosive that lands inside of KGB's arm cannon, explodes it, and it allows Operative just hit him in the face, and they're done. Game over. So all that's basically the fight stuff. Oh, and then Aquaman's fighting against Cheshire. And Cheshire at one point is being like, I don't know why this fight wasn't over sooner. After all you can do is talk to fish. And Aquaman's like, oh, okay. And just immediately punches her in the face with actual super strength. And it's just like, I was trying to go easy on you because you're just a normal person. But like, we're done now. So all that's happening. But meanwhile, the nuke is still heading towards the planet. And we see up in the moon base is Vostok, who sees that the nuke is going towards Spain. And he's like, all of those lives will be lost. and I will be somewhat responsible for that. And despite my horrid upbringing, despite my tragic backstory, I can't allow that to happen. I'm not actually a villain. So he calls up Operative and says, hey, can you get me the codes? And he's like, how do I trust you? And he's like, does it matter? Like, it's either the nuke explodes or the nuke explodes. And he's like, fair enough. But before he can, they're still in the middle of a fight with KGB, so he gets swatted aside. The codes go over to Saíz, who manages to push the button, sends the codes up to Vostok. And Vostok is like, all right, I turned off the missile, but more than that, I can do something else. And he flips it around and sends it back flying at the moon base. So as everybody else wraps up their fight, he calls down and he's like, yeah, like my childhood sucked. I have absolutely no place on this earth. The life that was there was not mine. I have nothing here, and therefore I have no more need to exist. And so as he realizes, they track the missile, they check out what's going on, and they're like, wait a minute, the missile's going back to the moon. And so Yawara transports over to the moon, teleports in front of Vostok and be like, hey, come with us, like, get out of here, let's you don't have to be here. And he's like, no, I need peace, I don't have anything to live for down there, and the team doesn't need me. And they're like, we know we don't need you, but we want you, come back with us. And they look out the window and they see the missiles like right there. And he's like, I fear it might be too late. And the whole thing explodes. Turns out that Aaron, Operative's nephew, grandson, whatever, disabled the nuclear aspect of it. So it was just the base itself exploding because, you know, a missile hit it. But there was no nuclear fallout on the moon. And so the team is all talking together. Not Vostok. He's not there. And it's just like, yep, all right, sounds great. And what should we do now? And Aquaman's like, how about we take a break? We've been going at it for a while. Let's take a break now. Let's all go do the things we got to do. And Prisoner of War's like, I'm still going to try to get the souls of my old comrades back into their families. So I'm off doing that. And Seiya's like, I'm going to join you. Yawara's like, I'm going back to the rainforest. And Mara says, I hope we see you again soon. And she's like, I doubt it. We see Operative and Aaron are going to Arizona because they want to go check in on Sky. Remember, the girl from the first arc that just disappeared? She's coming back. And Aquaman looks around just being like, well, it's a shame about Vostok, but he wanted peace. So I hope in his own way he's found it. And we cut to somewhere in the American Southwest as Vostok is on a motorcycle. And he says, yes, Yawara transported me off and the Operative gave me a bank account. And now I'm off to define my own mission, my reason for living. And I get to do that for myself for the first time ever. The end. I can appreciate the ideas that were being played with when they came up with this book. They seeded this team in the main Aquaman book. They gave it 2 annuals and a full arc to be able to be like, look, he has a team. We want this to work. And by God, they gave it their best. They really did. But at the end of the day, this is a C-lister team, if not lower, and it just wasn't going to sell. So, you know, they went out with a bang. They went out with nukes on the moon. I'll give them that. That's creative enough. But ultimately, I feel like the thing that this is going to be remembered for the most is, oh yeah, remember Aquaman had his own team, and that's going to be it. So this issue wasn't awful. It just kind of feels like one of those endings of, yeah, you know, we're turning off the lights, we're putting away the chairs, we're doing what we can here. Yeah, it just seems to me like they're putting away the pieces knowing that no one's ever going to pull them back out again. So all in all, not a bad issue, but the series is just kind of mediocre by definition. So I'm going to say this is a 6.5. It's okay. It's not great. It's just in existence. It is one of the 52 titles that were coming out at this time. Earth 2, number 32, written by Bennett, Wilson, and Johnson, art by Andy Smith and Airi Kamiyama. So, last issue we got a whole thing of Dr. Fate and Khalid just not getting along, and then ultimately they came back. This issue kind of picks up in the same place, but also more things from World's End have happened. The only major part is Oliver Queen is Red Arrow, and he's now part of the group. So we see Power Girl and Superman, Val-Zod, are looking up at all the stuff coming down from Apocalypse, and they're like, this is crazy, this is impossible, what are we supposed to do? And then a portal with Dr. Fate opens up, and he comes out next to Hawkgirl and Flash, and it's just like, oh, it's Apocalypse, it can't be stopped, and Look, you've got to listen. I abandoned you in battle, and like Dr. Fate, he did the helmets, Naboo, it turned against me. I cannot, its helmet is a curse. And meanwhile, Hawkgirl and Flash are like, oh man, this is crazy. We got to go up there and we got to fight. Like, you do this, I'll do that. We got to do this other stuff. Like, they're paying no attention to whatever it is he's saying. So we see Batman, Huntress, and Red Arrow come running in, talking to Commander Sato. And Sato's basically like, yep, everything is gone. Everything is dead. We have absolutely nothing more we can do. We're kind of screwed here. All of Earth is done for. We have nothing else we can do. And Batman's like, oh God, it's only a matter of time. And immediately Sato's like, hey, look, I'm telling you the truth. Everything we've done up to this point has only been to buy time. It seems like there's no way out here, but we can do something. And Batman's like, yeah, we can go down guns blazing. Let's burn this planet. Let's burn them with us. And immediately Sergeant Steel steps up being like, no, we're not being nihilists here. We're here to save the people. That's what we're doing. So he mentions how he went down into the fire pit, which he did. I remember that issue. And he came across the Avatar of the Red, Yolanda, and she was chained up by the sod, and she was angry, and she was willing to attack and all that. And he's like, yeah, she saw no way out, but why didn't she die? Why didn't she give up? Hope. That's what we gotta have. So we're even if it's easy to die and far harder to live, we're gonna do our duty. So Sato steps up being like, all right, all of our other plans have failed, all of our other hopes are lost. Right now, it's just us. 10 of us. That is it. That is our hope for saving everybody here. Every second counts. Let's go. And the 10 of them include Steel, Batman, Huntress, Red Arrow, Flash, Hawkgirl, Red Tornado, Power Girl, and Val-Zod. Notably, not Dr. Fate, but we'll get to that. So Steel and Batman are working on getting the guns online. Huntress and Red Arrow are working on the ships. Everyone else is going to stop this drill that is coming down out of Apocalypse and is by far the most imposing thing. So Hawkgirl comes up to Fate and is just like, hey man, put back on your helmet. Let's go. And he's like, no, I'm a liability. I don't know what's going to happen when I put on the helmet. And she's like, do it for me. And he's like, all right. So they get into the fight. They're fighting against a bunch of parademons and whatnot. Superman's unable to put a dent in the hull of the ship, and Hawkgirl's like, I was a whole explorer of tombs and stuff. I know weak spots, and I have supervision as well. So they find the exhaust port on the Death Star, and Fate and Hawkgirl fly down into it, and Fate's immediately like, wait a minute, I sense danger. And as they approach the core of this ship, they have like this philosophical debate of like, if you could go back and get your gift again, or your curse, depending on how you view it, would you? And Hawkgirl's just like, yeah, right now probably be super useful. And then they remember back to their origin story where Hawkgirl and I'm blanking on his name, Khalid, are going into the tomb of some Egyptian whatever. And as he's blown back by whatever fate energy from finding the helm, she gets attacked by a spirit that was defending this tomb. And the spirit's just like, who dares disturb me? Oh, wait, you're cool. You get a gift instead. And so then she sprouts hawk wings and passes out from the pain. And so he puts on the helmet and carries her out as Dr. Fate. And she's like, that was the day you saved us both. So it's time to be that once more, Khalid. So we see them attacking the core, and none of the bullets are working. Khalid looks at the helmet being like, I think I can kill two birds with one stone here. The energy in the helmet is incredible. It could destroy the core and destroy the helmet. I think that's what we should do. And she's just like, what? How could you even think about doing that? That's too much. And he's like, nah, don't try to stop me. And she comes up being like, look, I know you never asked for the helmet, but like, you have the strength to do what's right. You have the strength because you never fought for yourself. You fought to save me. So do it again. And we see some massive explosion comes up. The drill is separated from the main of Apocalypse. Power Girl tries grabbing it, holding it up. It's too heavy, so Valzad just pushes it off to the side, and as it crashes to the ground out of the way of the rest of the bunker, they're like, let's find Hawker and Fate. And they're coming out of the explosions just like, never mind, we're here. And Fate's wearing the helmet, and he says, I am in control, the threat is eliminated. And then Nabu's voice comes from the Etheria and says, oh, control? When fire swallows all, the pure of heart will fall. At the turning of the tide, a hero shall fall, bitten by pride. And Khalid's like, Nabu? What? And that's where it ends. That's where the series ends. I understand from a publishing perspective that you're going to get more done in the weeklies than you are in the monthlies, and you don't want people who are spending the money on the weeklies to feel like they are missing something if they don't also spend that extra bit of money on the monthlies. Like, the weeklies are enough of an engagement that you want that to be enough. I understand all of that. But if I didn't know the weeklies existed, and more importantly, if I weren't reading them while also reading this book is absolute garbage for the past, 12 issues. This is absolutely unacceptable from a publishing perspective, because none of these are complete stories. Every single one of them is just well, we hope you were reading that, because otherwise you're not going to understand, but check out this weird little side tangent. It is literally a book that somehow became nothing but tie-ins to a weekly series that should have been the tie-ins. So, yeah, it's just been a bad time all around, and Earth 2 World's End is not a great book either, which makes this all the more frustrating. So, yeah, it ain't good. I'm not a fan. And ending your book with this thing of saying, oh, yeah, and then more bad stuff's gonna happen. Oh, spooky. Shut up. Oh, God. 5.5. I'm not going to put it under the 5 mark. It wasn't a bad book individually, this issue. Series as a whole, we can debate that. But this issue was not a bad book. I think that ultimately, though, ending it with that sort of ooh, check out what's happening in World's Finest, oh, God. So yeah, 5.5. Not for me. Justice League 3000, number 15, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Howard Porter. So last issue, we got reintroduced to Ice and her whole backstory of how she lived for the past 1,000 years, and that Fire was actually working for Etrigan. And we pick up with that, where Fire is now in some weird demonic form, and Etrigan has summoned her and said, yes, I need you to go out and join in this fight. We are going to take Ice's castle. And he basically prods is that going to be a problem? I know you guys had a history. You cool? And she's like, yes, my lord, I serve you now. That was 1,000 years ago. Screw her. I don't even like her. We will take whatever we want, and she will pay dearly. And Etrigan's like, perfect. And afterwards, I will take you to bed. And she's like, awesome. So we then go back to Wonder Woman talking to Terry, and I gotta say, a lot of this is just the exact same stuff we've been dealing with for the past 12 issues, where Wonder Woman's like, Terry says, the Wonder Woman in the stories of the past was more merciful and caring and worked for peace, but you're all warlike. And she's like, well, DNA and memories and stuff like that. And it just goes on like that for a while. So we see Ice is basically like, you want me to join your team? You're not suspicious of me? And Ariel is like, I didn't say that, but yeah, we could always expand our ranks a little bit, and I trust that you are at least on the side of good. So at that point, Ice is kind of amazed at how Superman is not at all like the Superman she remembers, and he's like, yeah, I'm 1,000 times better. Don't even worry about it. And there's a little running gag here as to Superman realizing that Terry, the Flash, is in trouble because she's out on a battlefield, and everyone's like, Superman likes the Flash. We're gonna go save your girlfriend to make sure she's okay. And he's like, she's not my girlfriend. Shut up, guys. So, yeah, everyone goes off and they all start flying away. And because Ice is basically like, look, I don't want them messing with my stuff. I'd rather have my castle in one piece. So let's go out and do that. So we see Wonder Woman and Terry talk with some of the people in charge of the King Arthur side of the fight, and there's like, oh yes, this will be quite the magnificent fight. And then Terry looks up at the sky and sees all these demons coming down, just like, all right, well, I guess this is it. So the fight begins. Wonder Woman immediately leaps off the edge of the building, joins into the middle of the fray. Flash is up there like, this is terrifying, and frankly, I don't want any part of it. But the guy that's on King Arthur's side is like, well, those demons are going to make their way up here, so you better be ready to fight. And one of them, on cue, comes up. Flash just does like 1,000 punches in the face, and he's like, I thought you were afraid. And she's like, I'm going to need new underwear, but yeah, I guess I'm willing to fight, whatever. So she runs off. She's trying to do whatever. Some demons they have a drill dozer that comes up from underground. And Terry's like, I thought they were flying. Yep, they drill now. So it's just an extended fight scene. Justice League shows up along with Ice. And Ice is like, God, they're messing with my house, man. This sucks. I hate this. And Superman and Batman start bickering with each other, as they always have been. And they look down in the battlefield and see Wonder Woman and Flash, who are basically holding their own, but it is a losing battle with just how many demons there are. And then Ice gets so pissed off about the fact that the Wonder Woman is literally tearing apart pieces of her home to use as weapons, that she's like, nope, this was my place. I'm not letting this happen. And so she freezes the entire battlefield all at once. King Arthur's side and demons. Flash and Wonder Woman make it out unscathed somehow, to which Ice comes up to Wonder Woman just like, bitch, hold my hoops. Come here. We've got words that need to be spoken. And so they start arguing with each other. And it's only in the middle of their argument that Flash comes in and says, hey guys, look up. And a whole nother horde of demons comes in now, all being led by fire. So all the rest of the Justice League has to deal with the rest of the demons, and Superman's super pumped about the fight, and he's like, yeah, of course, I finally get to punch somebody. Flash runs through, tries to do whatever she can. Ultimately, she gets knocked on her ass by a demon, to which Wonder Woman comes in and says, stay away from my friend. And Flash is like, oh, you think that we're friends? Oh my God, you like me? And she's like, no, I don't. I don't like anybody. Shut up. It's the heat of the battle, whatever. So we see then Ice's building, her castle, is just exploded. It's just whole thing starts coming apart. We see that was caused by Ice and Fire fighting up in the top of the terraces. And Ice is trying to get through her to Fire, saying like, oh, Beatrice, please, I don't want to do battle with you. And Fire's like, fool, Beatrice is dead. I am the guardian of hell. And yeah, okay, I don't want to fight. And she just turns back into normal Beatrice, and like, they just start hugging it out and just like, oh yeah, all's forgiven. Well, not all. Like, you're going to fix my place. But beyond that, we're cool. So then Flash comes in and says like, hey guys, super awesome and cool, but we still got like a bunch of demons that need fighting. And then we go back to Castle Justice League, where it has been ransacked, pillaged. It's a whole bunch of messes in the halls and whatnot. And we get running commentary from Sinestro and Mirror Master about, oh, it's so easy because all of them just left. Like, we were able to take care of all of this. We just walked right in. And leading them all and having aerial masters in her grasp is Lois Lane, who says, oh, our plan is to do to the Justice League what I just did to Ariel, and let it never be not said that the age of the Injustice League has not begun. So, yeah. That marks the end of Justice League 3000. It picks up again after Convergence into Justice League 3001. I don't know what the changes are there, but, it's something. I'm sure there's like a guiding plan. I'm sure that either Keith Giffen or DeMatteis is like, here's the gist of what we're going for here. I actually just the other day, I was looking through some back issues and I saw a maxi series that DC put out called Camelot 3000. And this was like back in the 80s, like 70s, 80s, this book was put out, maybe 90s. So the fact that I think they're pulling from that, I think they're pulling from a very specific well here, is kind of amazing to me. Beyond that, it is kind of just more of the same. I didn't really get anything new out of it. It's not a bad issue, but it definitely feels incomplete. Like, if they didn't get the renewal to Justice League 3001, this would be absolutely the least impactful ending of all time. Like, it doesn't even, it's a cliffhanger, and then, like, the main story, even if you ignore the cliffhanger, is still just in the middle of a fight. So, yeah, no, it's mediocre ending at best, but whatever we get to in 3001, hopefully we pick up on some of these plots. Overall, I'm going to say it's a 6.5. Nothing too fantastic, but still decent, all said and done. So, we'll check out what happens post-Convergence. Lobo number 6, written by Cullen, Bunn, art by Cliff Richard. So last issue we had Lobo going up against someone named Pariah, who seems to be his equal and opposite from some other race, but she claims that she's responsible for the death of Lobo's entire planet. So we pick up this issue. It opens with just basically here's the story so far, just in case you were coming in late, where he's been on a contract to take out all of these Earth-destroying aliens and whatnot, and he's taken out almost all of them. He's on the last one, which turns out to be this Pariah person who's basically taken the Doomsday Weapon for herself, a ghost fleet called the Demiurge Armada that can be summoned in an instant. And so we see that she's got her base somewhere in the middle of a bunker out in some wilderness. And the humans that Lobo has, along with, I forget their names, it's Luna, Rave, and a last one. Whatever the last one's name is. Emily. There we go. Emily's kept on the ship. Luna and Rave are meant to go in and help Lobo out. And Rave makes a little joke about, like, oh, yeah, it's cold out here. You're saying that we should stay focused. Maybe we should stay frosty. Get it? Frosty? And he's like, I hope you die first, Rave. So they go into the bunker. Immediately, Lobo says, let's split up. We're just keeping an eye out for her. Shoot to kill. Do not worry about taking her in alive. And Luna's like, why are we suddenly a part of this? You kept wanting to do this alone. He's like, I want this done quick, and I just want it done. So we then go to a flashback back to Zarnia. The planet's falling apart, and Lobo goes and confronts the Emperor, who is doing this blood sacrifice thing with the planet's altar. And he's crazy. He's absolutely off his rocker. And Lobo comes up being like, how long have you been sick? And you've been doing the stuff, the sharing the essence with Zarnia. You've been poisoning our planet for so long. And Emperor's like, you got it wrong, man. No, I'm saving it. This is you just don't believe me. You need to take your communion. And he points to this blood chalice thing. He's just like, you can be one with me, with Zarnia forever. And Lobo's like, you're making me do this, and I don't want to do this, but I got to do this for the sake of the planet. And then in runs the Emperor's daughter, Lobo's lover, who's just like, leave him alone! You don't know, you're a traitor, you're one of the rebels! And so she slashes at Lobo, and Lobo's like, not you two. And he stabs her through the chest, and she just, straight up dies right there. And the Emperor's just like, oh no! I forgive you, as long as you take your communion. And she's like, you forgive... What? No, don't do that. And he grabs the Emperor by the throat, plunges him underwater, just starts drowning him, just being like, oh, you must die with all of Zarnia. You've damned me. You forced me to become the Lobo. So he flies off. Zarnia's going to be killed, and he's going off in a ship. And he brought along the communion chalice. And he's like, all that remains of Zarnia is a tainted and poisoned. And he drinks it down, and he said, it is madness. So Lobo's still going through the corridors, tunnels, whatever you want to call them, and looking for Pariah. Eventually he finds a blood trail, follows it, and ends up finding the body of Rave, who's just been absolutely disemboweled. And he's like, hey, Rave, tell me that joke again. Is that joke still funny on the way down? He doesn't care at all about her, or him. So he keeps going down the halls, and he's like, yeah, Pariah says that she killed my planet. I don't believe her, but that's why this fight is going to be very personal to me. So Emily hops over the comms being like, hey, do you see anything? What's going on down there? And he's like, we split up. I don't know where Rave or Luna are. And he's just lying to her, just doesn't want to get upset. And he pushes her off the comms as he enters a room and finds Pariah with her foot on Luna's throat. And he's just like, I was starting to get impatient. I knew that you would be led here. You were sending them out as bait. And he's just like, I am going to murder you. That's what's going to happen here. And Luna yells just like, just kill her. Don't worry about me. And Pariah squashes down her foot, crushes this girl's spine. She's immediately dead. And Lobo's just like, oh, wasn't that precious? She actually thought I cared what happened to her. So Lobo jumps into battle, starts attacking Pariah. He's not holding anything back. He ends up cutting off her like robot hand cannon thing going on. And he's like, I don't understand why she's claiming this kill. I'm the one who killed the Emperor. I'm the one who doomed the planet. There's no way that she can legitimately say that this is hers. Like, there's no possible way. And eventually he manages to throw his sword at her, distract her long enough to get his hand around her throat, and like, this is it. He's 100% got it. And this is where Pariah says, oh, you got it, didn't you? The businessman told you what I said. I was the one who poisoned your emperor and drove him crazy in the first place. I had him seed that madness into Zarnia's core. The whole reason the planet died was to make you my final doomsday device. Lobo, you are my creation. And he tries to blast Lobo. And, of course, he's a Zarnian. He just immediately starts healing up. And he's like, I'm going to honor my contract. And he starts snapping her throat. And she's like, wait, hold on. What are you doing? If you kill me, you're not going to know who hired me to destroy Zarnia in the first place. Or, like, who hired me to try to destroy Earth. You need to know all that stuff, right? Don't you want to know who hired? And then he just gouges out her eyes, rips off her arms, and just straight up murders her. And he's like, assuming I believe you, yes, I would want to know, but I can find that out on my own. So he goes back out, he talks to Emily, and he's like, hey, look, you've gone through a lot here. You deserve a little bit of the cut. I will give you a quarter of the bounties for everything I am owed, and I'm going to leave this with you. And he hands over basically the little beeper that summons the Ghost Fleet Armada thing. And he's like, if you ever get sick of this stupid-ass backwater planet, just press that button and, like, boom, gone. You'll just destroy the planet. No big deal. So he leaves. He hops back on the ship, and final page is like, assuming that she was telling the truth, that she was responsible for everything that happened. And even if I do believe her, it doesn't matter. Her employers compensated her for the destruction of Zarnia. They paid the wrong person. I'm the one who did it, and I'm going to go collect what belongs to me. So, oh, Lobo, you're such a lovable rogue, I guess. It didn't pack a punch. I'm trying to find a way to say this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm totally negative on it, because it wasn't great. But there was a point in the middle where I was actually intrigued with this whole, okay, we're going to explore this stuff and, like, discover who's putting this hit out on planet Earth. Why do they want to destroy the planet? Enough to hire 8 killers to do this. Like, it's an interesting plot. But then last issue, they introduce this character and say she's the one responsible for killing Zarnia. And then this issue, they kill her. And then Lobo says, well, yeah, I'm going to go find out more about that. And the whole Earth being destroyed thing is just kind of tangentially wrapped up and no one even cares. And, like, I get it. It's in character, but at the same point, it's not a satisfying read. So it's juggling a lot there. I think ultimately I do come down on this a little bit more negatively than positively. It's still not a bad issue. It's just when you look at it in the arc overall, I think it leads a lot more. So I'm going to say this is a 6. And hopefully next arc, whatever it may be, can be a little bit more focused and entertaining. More space stuff. I don't need to be on Earth. Send me to space. Infinity Man and the Forever People, number 8, written by Dan DiDio and Keith Giffen, art by Daniel HDR. So last issue, Mark Moonrider was attacked by some femme fatales who were looking for Dreamer, and some other stuff happened, I'm sure. So this issue wakes up with Dreamer waking up, and she sees that Mark is in trouble. So she runs into the room with the other new gods and says, I saw him die. We got to go save him. And everyone's like, what? What happened? It's like, oh, Mark, he's dead, but he's not dead, but he could be dead. And it's like, okay, we start at the beginning. What's going on? And she says, okay, I saw Mark. And in walks Seraphina, and Seraphina's like, oh yeah, I saw him too. He's down by the beach. I just left him on a bench. And then all of a sudden, Viking's like, wait a minute, hold on, we can just check the mother box to see his position. And it goes ping ping, and it says, oh, Mother Box found him, but there are 4 people with him, all from Apocalypse. So we cut back over to Mark, who's just got the ever-loving crap beaten out of him. And it's like, oh, yes, you really are quite cute, even after you've been beaten up. So do what we ask, or you'll have to die. And he's just like, go to hell. I'm not doing anything you say. So they're about to kill him once again. But then the one who's got a whip, I don't know her name, she's like, hold on. There's one other thing that could help him see reason. And she opens up a portal, and inside is Lord Agog. This guy that we've been hearing about, he's like a priest of the Church of Yuga-Khan. And he's like, what's the meaning of this? Have you gotten the anti-life? I need that anti-life. And they're like, no, but this guy is wanting to join the church because he is able to get you the anti-life if you can get him in the church. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, totally. Hey, bro, new gods suck. Am I right? Like Highfather, Dark Side, assholes. Both of them. So how about we go back to the old gods, Yuga-Khan, he was cool. Come on, buddy, join the party. And Mark's like, I know you about your cult. You suck. I'll never join you, and I'll never betray Dreamer to you as well. And Yuga-Khan's like, all right, hold on. I need to go check the scripture to see what we do about this. And he goes over to this book and just like, the teachings of Yuga-Khan are much better than the New Genesis teachings. Like, we shouldn't have cast them aside so easily. Oh, yes, it says right here, if you do not deliver the power to me, kill him. And so they just immediately, like, get ready to kill him again. The woman with the whip seems particularly upset about this. Like, she kind of wanted him to join in. But what's-her-face, Enchanthrax starts, like, messing with his mind to the point where he does end up dying. Mark dies in the middle of this alleyway. None of his teammates are there. And then right as soon as they die, they show up and just like, oh, hey, we're here. And Dreamer's there too, so they're like, oh, sweet, awesome, she's here, let's take her. But Dreamer's like, oh my god, Mark is dead! Oh, Jesus! And they're like, oh my god, is he actually dead? Did we literally not make it in time? So everyone starts launching into battle against these 4 femme fatales. And Viking and Big Bear are looking at the Mother Box being like, hey, we're kind of over our heads here, but the Mother Box is not doing the whole Infinity Man thing. What's going on? And it's like, well, maybe the box wants us to fight for ourselves. All right, let's do it. So they all launch in. It's a whole big fight scene going on. Eventually, as they're doing their thing, we get one little aside where Enchanthrax is fighting against Seraphina, and she tries to do some magic stuff, to which Seraphina pulls out a cartridge and says, yep, I got a cartridge for weird magic stuff too, and then blasts it back at her. But the main thing is Dreamer goes over to Mark and is like, oh my god, oh, you're dead. You swore you would protect me from my life, and I would protect you in death, so let me save you. And then her eyes go black, her speech bubble goes black, and she starts listing off the anti-life equation, to which point he jets up awake with his own eyes black now, and it's like, oh, look, I saved you, I brought you back. And Mark's like, oh my god, no! And everyone's like, did she just raise him? Is he no longer dead? And then through the portal, we see Lord Agog's like, that's what I want. We're going to use that power, and we're going to bring back Yuga-Khan with it. That's exactly what's going on. And everyone's looking on like, holy crap, that's not okay. That's messed up. But the portal starts closing to Lord Agog's just like, I've seen it now. I know who we're after. It can wait. We don't need it to happen right now. So he closes off the portal. But then Dreamer turns and faces the femme fatales being like, you should be worried about yourselves now. You killed one man I wanted. I can feel the rejection of Apocalypse inside of you. There's nothing darker than what's in store for you now. And she casts some crazy spell of anti-life, and she's like, you wanted it, you can have it. And then just cut. And we have like 3 epilogues. Epilogue 1, Mark's being tucked in by Dreamer in bed, and as she leaves the room saying, oh, it's good to have things back to normal, his eyes start glowing with that black crackle energy. Epilogue 2, the femme fatales are beaten and brought back to Granny Goodness, who's like, they thought they could get away from Apocalypse, screw them. I'm gonna give them love only Granny can provide. And then epilogue 3 is Big Bear at his computer trying to talk to Kirby, and Kirby's like, error, I'm not alone in here. And then all of a sudden Infinity Man in a holographic form shows up and says, you know me, I know you, I need your help. And Big Bear's like, oh, okay. There is one more issue, and it's listed in here as the secret origin of Infinity Man. Sure. Boy, this book had some lofty goals. It had some, like, I feel like that's a recurring motif for the books that Dan DiDio writes, where he's like, oh man, I'm going to do the Jack Kirby space epic and we're going to do this whole big thing and oh, what's that? It's not selling? Okay, I'll wrap it up in an issue. And that's exactly what happened here. Like, maybe he did only plan a certain number of issues unless it really sold well, but like, this issue feels like we set up all of this crazy stuff about like Yuga Khan, and now we're showing that Beautiful Dreamer can resurrect the dead via the anti-life equation. And then it's just going to be like, and that's that. Wipe our hands. It's all done. Like, are you kidding me? That's the first time anyone has been interesting in this entire book. And you're just going to say like, nah, done. So, yeah. I mean, we'll see what next issue has. But honestly, it just seems like it's going to be a, and here's everything I didn't get to talk about sort of issue. So, yeah. I'll give it like a 6.5. Because I think this independent issue is actually somewhat engaging. As for other issues before it, no, not really. But this one feels like it actually had a little bit of engagement. It's just that I don't care about the characters, and now the book is pretty much done. So, too little, too late, 6.5. Swamp Thing number 40, written by Charles Soule, art by Jesús Saíz. So last issue, we had the Greens infected by the rot. All of Machine Queen's plans have come to fruition. And as a last-ditch effort, Swamp Thing, Alec Holland, goes in and frees in the Green all of the previous avatars of the Green. And they're like, what in the hell's going on here? So as they're chastising Alec of like, what did you do? We have him just be like, later, first, you deal with him, deal with Anton. And we get this overarching narration over the top, which I'll get to later, but it's talking about story and how stories have endings and final pages and blah, blah, but we'll get to it. So immediately, some of the avatars start attacking Anton. One of them just gets ripped apart to shreds, and then Anton starts trying to ascend out of the Green, and they say like, oh, don't let him get away. But ultimately, Alex is just like, no, wait, everyone stay here. We can take care of Anton later. He's always going to be a problem, but he's not the biggest problem right now, I guarantee you. And Alec lays down the law immediately. He's like, look, you all are past avatars. I brought you back because I need your help. However, I need you to understand this. I am the avatar, and either you are going to obey me or I will send you back to oblivion. You got that? Like, there will be no power struggle here. So Brother Jonas and Capucine step up and they're like, hey, here's what happened. The Avatar of the Grey was also in here. It was a whole thing. Don't worry about it. I'll lend you some of my energy, Alex, so you can be okay again. And some of them here like, whoa, hold on. The Avatar of the Grey, like, Rot and Grey working together, that's a problem. And Swamp Thing's like, it's not them. They don't matter. They're not important to this. The bigger part here is there's a new kingdom called the Machines, the Rhythm. That's what we need to worry about. And we see that out in the Arctic, Machine Queen has made herself a new fortress that is literally just a giant version of herself. And Anton lands inside of her mouth. And she's like, oh, yes, Anton, please do come in. So Swamp Thing explains all that to the other avatars. And they're like, okay, what do you want us to do? Like, how do we survive? How does the Green make it through this? Because is the Red involved in all this? And it's like, nah, the Red's Animal Man got canceled. We don't have to worry about them. What we need to do now is we need to save the Green. So the Rot's poison has touched everything, and one of the other avatars steps forward being like, we can cleanse it. There's methods to do that. It's weak, but it'll take time, but we can get it done. He's like, we don't have time, so start now. Take whoever you need. And then Capucine's like, we should close the portal, and we should fortify, and we should hold up here. And Swamp Thing's like, no, who knows what's going on in the world outside? We need to be able to go to her. We need to attack her. And he looks out the avatars saying, like, look, you're all former avatars. You are all powerful in your own right, but none of you are being forced to do this. I need soldiers to go out there and fight and end this. And they're like, but if we go out there and we die, like, that's it. Like, we don't stay with the Green. We're out for good. And he's like, yes, that's why I'm not forcing you. This has to be voluntary. And out steps Cedar, Jason Woodrue, who's like, I'm in. Not for you. You suck. But for the green. And he's like, fair enough. So he looks out at the rest of the crowd like, who else? And we see sometime later a whole swarm of avatars making their way out of this bayou. So as they're looking around the world, it's been like, oh, it's been so long since I felt the world like this. And they look off to the woods, and standing there is the decomposing body of Alec Holland, who's been reformed. And he's just like, yeah, that's me. I don't know how the machines did this. It's honestly super weird. And Alec's like, hey, everybody. Machine Queen said that I should show up and greet you and tell you to find her so that she can do this. And then I'm supposed to do this. And he crushes his own head in his hands and falls down dead. And Swamp Thing's like, all right, let's go. So skipping forward, they're fighting. They're in the Gobi Desert. We have the entirety of the Greens, the Swamp Thing's avatars, and then a machine army and a rot army and a fungus army all working together to fight against the Greens. So you got this whole thing going on. The narration over top of this, and this is where I probably should bring it up, is, like I said, talking about stories. And it's saying like, yes, there are stories that exist in different dimensions. Like, that's the best way to think of it. Some of them are just one creative expression, like a painting or a sculpture where they're frozen and they're static, and that captures like emotion. Then there are two dimensions, and that's where the stories are meant to be experienced as a sequence over moments, over time, music, novels, things like that. But then, of course, there are extra dimensions that have to be considered. The audience. No matter what, you have to consider your audience. They are unpredictable. They are impossible to plan for. It could be one, or it could be millions. And then we see Swamp Things being attacked by a bunch of machines, and the blue Swamp Thing, the one that was the thing that believed it was Alec Holland but wasn't, from the Alan Moore run, it comes up and saves his life. And as they're looking at the battlefield, Swamp Thing, Alec is like, the Machine Queen wants me. If she gets to me, like, this is all over. And he's like, I can feel myself getting stronger, but maybe we just need time. Maybe I just need to separate away long enough. You guys stall as long as you can. And they're like, cool, we will fight. So he flies away using his green wings. Meanwhile, Machine Queen comes in, slices off the blue Swamp Thing's head, and says, you machines and rot monsters, go get him. Bring me Holland. So they're flying through the air. Swamp Thing gets tackled down by the machines, and ultimately he crashes in a Philadelphia library. And as he looks at one of the books, he's like, wait a minute, books. They're made of paper. They're made of the green. And then we get a bit meta. So all of a sudden he's touching a book, and then the book itself is talking about the fight that's going on between the Green and the other kingdoms. And we see Swamp Thing's face, and then we go inside of this new realm, this white void, where there's a new being, a new avatar, you could say, who's talking to Alec as he's in like paper format. And Alec's like, where am I? What's going on? And he's like, oh, no, don't worry about that. That's all on hold. They'll be fine. And the whole story is a bit up in the air right now. And Alec's like, what's going on? And it's just the fourth wall being dismantled in front of your face. And he's like, oh, you have to think bigger. Think this isn't just a normal kingdom of life. This is something else. And he says, oh, well, as you read a story, it changes depending on who's reading it. The visuals, the way people process it, it evolves over time. And if the story, once it is born, does not garner attention, it will be forgotten. It will end up dying. Sound familiar? Stories are also a kingdom of life. Get it? That's what we're going for here. So they show that this is a new void being formed of like stories themselves being this kingdom of life. And Swamp Thing's like, okay, then what am I? And he's like, you're a work in progress. And frankly, we're not sure what's going on with you, but you are very creative when it comes to the green. And we would absolutely like to have you here. You could just stay here and let someone else deal with whatever the fallout is for down there. You don't need to go and finish up your story. I mean, we could just stay here and talk about story. Wouldn't that be transgressive? And Swamp Thing's like, no, I got to go deal with that. And he's like, all right, well, I'm giving you a little bit of extra power. You can come back here whenever you like, but just know you are almost out of pages. And we see whatever that did gave him a boost. He's back in the fight. He's powered a little bit stronger. We see that Jason Woodrue goes up against the leader of the Gray, the Avatar. Both of them end up falling in that battle, but that frees Gaurav, who is now able to seal off the green so they can get more powerful. Etrigan comes in, honoring his deal from before. He's leading a demon army to help in the fight. Anton bails because he sees that this is going south quick, until finally it is Swamp Thing v. Machine Queen. And she's pissed. She goes in like, I'm not going to let you take everything from me again. And he's like, you are a poison. You are not in this cycle of life. Like, even the rot is good enough to know that it is a part of things, but you are death. And so I am going to take you and dismantle you. And he puts a tree inside of her, grows it out quickly. Her body parts are all spread about, and ultimately she ends up deactivating. Cut to sometime later, some other room. A little robot dog gets plugged into a wall, and Swamp Thing talks to it. It's the same color scheme as Machine Queen, and he's like, look, I know you can hear me. I know you're in there. The Justice League took care of the Arctic base and all that. You don't have to worry. You're young. You're a very young new kingdom, and it's possible you just didn't know exactly what you were doing. So I'm not in the habit of killing children, so here's what's going to happen. That plug in the wall will let you go into the outside world again. You can do that whenever you feel that you are ready. But only do it when you are willing to work with others. Because if you go out there and you try anything like that again, you do not get a third chance. So he walks out, closes the door, and the dog just looks over at the plug. And then our final page is the swamp, where Gorov is talking to Abby out in the meadow, the swamp, as Swamp Thing is reading 100 Years of Solitude in a book. And he goes, and he goes to touch it, and that's it. That's where it ends. It's meta as hell, dude. You always got to go meta as hell. I love this whole series, beginning to end. Even if we're just looking at Charles Soule's run, I think he does a fantastic job with expanding the mythology, introducing these new kingdoms, which has kind of become a mainstay of the books. Everyone kind of just accepts like, oh yeah, there's different branches of life. We're just running with that. So it absolutely works. I'm not sure how I feel about story being a thing. While I understand it from like a meta perspective of, oh, I'm a storyteller and Swamp Thing is a story, so therefore it's its own thing. Just in the concept of how it fits into the DC like kingdoms, like, there's magic, and then there's the Swamp Thing like life kingdoms, and the story kind of feels like it's a bit too blending of the two for me. It's a bit too closer to the magic side than it is the Swamp Thing side, but it's an interesting concept at the very least. It doesn't harp on it too long. It kind of feels the same as the end of Animal Man, where they introduced this idea of there is a being who is essentially like the creator of the life web in general. Like, he is this higher being that has life all over the universe. So again, interesting concept that ultimately isn't going to get fleshed out, but I'm okay with it. As for this run, I mean, it's top tier. It's absolutely worth reading beginning to end. I definitely would highly suggest checking it out. But if I had to say how to best read this, I would say read it through as presented, but when it comes to the Future's End issue, save that for last. Read that as the very final thing you read, because I think that is such a perfect capstone to everything that has been presented before this, and is just like a beautiful little send-off. I really think that that's a better finale than this one particularly is. But it's overall, I enjoy it. I think this series is fantastic, and this particular issue, I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to give it the 9. I think maybe this issue deserves an 8.5 on its own, but the 9 is just because it didn't fault the ending, and it makes it so this series is just infinitely rereadable. I can always go back for more. Batman Eternal number 48, written by Snyder, Tynion, Fox, Higgins, and Seeley, art by Fernando Blanco. So this issue picks up in Mayor Hades' office, where Jason Bard is like, I know how critical I was of Gordon and the crime he committed, but it turns out we have evidence where he's totally innocent. And Hades' like, okay. And he's like, well, so we gotta let him out. It's very important. He's like, oh, why we gotta let him out? What's the rush on this? It's like, look, Gordon's the only one who's been able to make it through like all of the crazy, insane stuff that goes on in this city, and we need him right now, okay? And Hades just kind of like packing up his bags, just like, I don't care if you think he's innocent or not. A jury found him guilty. He's in prison now, and I'm not about to let him free when the city hates him in an election year. And so we see Hades about to get on a helicopter, and Bard's like, where are you going? He's like, no, this city's screwed. I'm leaving until everything gets better. I'll call the shots from elsewhere. Peace. And Bard grabs him, and he's just like, you son of a bitch. Gordon protected you for years, and for what? For you to turn your back at the last moment? You can get on that helicopter if you want, but you're going to sign these damn release papers. Meanwhile, intercut with all this, we see Penguin in Blackgate has gotten his hands on a cell phone, and some mystery person is calling saying, like, I'm going to give you everything that Falcone took from you. I'm going to put you back in your rightful place. All I need for you is for you to help me with something. Nay, someone. And we see him look outside the bars, give a little nod to one of the guards. The guard goes and knocks out a different guard and then opens up an entire cell block. And so it's just absolute chaos in Blackgate as all of the inmates are rioting against their guards. Meanwhile, Bat Family, they're going against the Rogues. Everyone's got their pairing. Red Robin Clayface, Batgirl Joker's daughter, Batwing with Scarecrow, Bluebird with Mr. Freeze, and Red Hood with Bane. And they're all going up in their fight, and they're doing pretty well. Everyone's pretty much nailing the fight as much as they can. But in the Batcave, we see all their communications are going routed through there, and Hush has just taken over the Bat computer. And he's like, oh, so many birds to play with. So he starts tippity-tapping on the keyboard, and all of a sudden, the different members of the Bat family start falling. Their tech starts failing. So we see Batwing's suit fail, something in Batgirl's comms goes crazy, Red Robin's wings fail, an EMP goes off in Bluebird's suit, so all of her tech goes dark, and Red Hood's, I don't know, gun, whatever he's got on his holster just starts exploding, so he's forced to throw it away. And specifically with Red Hood, he turns around and sees Bane in the giant mech suit coming down on him, and he's like, oh, crap. So we then see Julia coming out of the water outside the harbor, and she's like, oh no, Hush has taken over the Bat computer. I need to be able to get into the system. Damn it, why hasn't anyone else built a Bat compute? And then all of a sudden she realizes something. I'm not even sure what at this point. And she's like, oh right. And then she just runs off somewhere into the city. We then see Batman, whose plane crashed last issue. He's kind of stumbling through this little deserty patch, I don't know what you call it, but he stumbles across, I guess, a Gotham Air Force base, sure, and he climbs the fence and he steals a jet, but not before marking the pavement where it was with an IOU and then a bat symbol. So we then go to the Gotham Gazette, where Vicky Vale is like, oh yeah, no, it's crazy, I'll be out there, I'll get the story, and in comes Spoiler, who's like, hey, why aren't you reporting on Jason Bard? And she's like, what? Oh, hey, you're that Spoiler chick. Wow, no, super cool to meet you. Anyway, Jason Bard is part of a larger story, and if I run this story without knowing the larger thing, I'm going to ruin his life for nothing. I need to know the whole thing going on. And she's like, look, that's easy for you to say. There's not a manhunt on you. You should be taking the extra effort here, okay? Like, run something, run anything. What about the Clue Master and the Loser Squad that I've been pointing you to? And Vicky's like, dude, the actual villains, the ones that people care about, are currently going crazy and fighting the Bat family out there. Why would I care about the Loser Squad? And then she says that's exactly the point, as the windows get shot out, and right outside the window is Clue Master saying, spoilers, and fires a grappling hook that pulls Stephanie out of the window, but not before she leaves a flash drive on Vicky Vale's floor. So hopefully that'll be enough. So we see Batman flying just a standard normal Air Force jet. He's hearing on the radio, like, oh, Blackgate Penitentiary, riot, Mr. Freeze, Bane, stuff like that. And we see Bard running into the police headquarters and Bullock's running out the door at the same time saying, oh, Blackgate, there's a riot going on. And Bard realizes, oh, crap, Jim. So we cut over to Blackgate as Gordon's rushing into the fight, trying to protect people from getting too beat up. And he's like ready to start fighting against some of these guys. He's like, all right, then, let's go. Your move. And all of a sudden, a voice from behind says, no, you leave him. We'll be dealing with Mr. Gordon. As we see Penguin and several of, I assume, his goons are ready to do something with Gordon. I'm not convinced that it's going to be murderize, but we'll see. I was very, I don't want to say negative. I was very pessimistic as to the fights with all of the rogues gallery because it just seemed like it was padding for the sake of padding. I'm still not convinced that it isn't, but it does take up a lot less of the book than I expected it to, so I'll give kudos there. In regards to the rest of the stuff, I like the Bat IOU. That's a solid moment. Stephanie going in talking to Vicky and basically being like, come on, do something. That was good. I like Bard, not as a character here, but at least chewing out the mayor and saying, like, we can do something here. Come on, let's do it. It's good evolution on his part, but ultimately I don't think he can really be redeemed. The only thing I'm a little bit iffy on is Hush just taking over the Bat computer. I feel like there should be some safeguards in there, but maybe that's part of Hush's thing. I don't know. Beyond that, it's good. It's all right. I'm going to say it is a 7. Just feels pretty average there. It's a good issue, but it's not great, and it's not either. It's just right down the middle. So, yeah, we'll see what wraps up in the final 4 issues of this series. Future's End number 44, written by Azarel, Lemire, Jurgens, and Giffen, art by Patrick Zurcher and Andy McDonald. So this issue picks up with Mr. Terrific looking on at everything that's going on, and he gets an alert from his system saying, oh, our main servers, there's been a breach, and he says, lower the firewalls, let it in. And out pops the Atom, Ray Palmer, who I guess went through the actual wires themselves, and he's like, hey, I got your message. Do we have a plan? And Batman's standing there like, yes, we have a plan and we're going to need your help and we are running out of time. And they look and they see like the jets are still flying around Manhattan, which is now way high up in the air. And they're being told to fire, but there's nothing to fire at because Brainiac is inside the dome, just piloting along, just do. Meanwhile, Lois is standing around watching Superman and the Justice League try to save as many people as possible. Superman's holding up entire buildings, and as they start like cracking and falling down for debris, he's zapping them with heat vision. He's like, all right, enough cleanup. You guys handle that. I'm going to go stop this thing at the source. So he heat visions the building to stay up, and he goes to take down Brainiac. Meanwhile, Firestorm is flying around like, Superman's trusting us to do this. How do we do that? And we see Dr. Polaris is actually acting as a hero. He's holding up the buildings with his magnetic powers, and Jason is walking Madison through what she needs to do in order to try to hold these buildings up, to like melt the exterior just enough to allow new bonds to form and blah, blah, blah. So Superman flies toward Brainiac, and Brainiac's like, oh, initiate defense sequence. But we cut over to Tim Drake, Terry McGinnis, and the whole rest of that crowd as Tim apparently just got the lowdown on the future's in trouble. And Tim's like, well, maybe we should care about the present. That seems super important and whatnot. And Tim's like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is to save your children. He's like, I have children? He's like, well, no, you're metaphorical children. Don't worry about it. Look, I don't expect you to understand, but like, I can still stop what's happening, but I'm going to need some help. And Tim's like, yeah, if the future is what you described, I'm happy to help. We can let this monster do whatever. Then we go out on the street, and we've got Joker, Cyborg, Batman, and there's like the people who are waiting in line to buy the U-Sphere. There's one guy who, despite the fact that debris is literally falling inches away from him, he's not moving from his spot, first in line, and the Batman half of the robot's like, citizen, I highly suggest you get inside. It's not safe here. And the guy's like, nah, man, I've been waiting for 2 weeks. I'm not giving up my place in line. And then the Joker half's like, they call me crazy. So Terrific, Adam, and Batman are all trying to figure out, like, okay, we have a program. We think it can work, but like, we don't have enough computing power in the shade net. And so Terrific's like, use my servers. You have access to all of them. And Adam's like, no, it's still not enough. We can't do it. And Batman's like, wait, hold on. There is enough, but we have to do it this way. And they boot up Brother Eye. So we see Superman fighting against Brainiac. He's getting zapped by some lasers. And Superman's just like, no, I said no. And he starts punching through the lasers until he gets up to Brainiac. And he's like, we went to the mat in defense of this plan, and I'll do it again. And he punches Brainiac in the face so hard that the action of Brainiac falling shows the different versions of Brainiac throughout like the years. So we get like modern age, Bronze Age, Silver Age, Golden Age, until finally Brainiac hits the floor. He's back to his normal, like, kaiju self. And Brainiac's like, damage analysis. And the whole thing's just like, it ain't going well, man. So at that moment, in comes a U-Sphere. Adam is riding it. And he's like, hey, buddy, this will only hurt a little bit. And then all of a sudden, a swarm of U-Spheres come out of nowhere and start surrounding big kaiju Brainiac entirely. And he tries launching a defense protocol, but he gets interrupted and overridden by the Brother Eye. So Adam's like, oh, you weren't kidding. Everyone's got U-Spheres, so this should work. We can do this. And so he presses a button, and all of a sudden, Brainiac starts being shrunken down. And as that's happening, his connection to the pilot station of Manhattan goes kaput. So Manhattan starts falling out of the sky. And like the military is like, oh yeah, no, they're screwed. They're going to die. We have nothing to help there. But Superman goes down through the pavement. He's punching through the ground as quickly as possible. And immediately everyone, like all the other superheroes, are freaking out like, what do we do? How do we stop this? What are we going to do? How do we save people? And Batman's just like, don't worry about it. Superman's on it. It's what he does. So Superman gets underneath the city and he manages to grab it and keep it afloat so that it doesn't crash into the earth. Meanwhile, Brainiac is still shrinking down smaller and smaller. Adam goes over, just picks him up by the scruff of his back and is like, well, you lose. And he puts him inside of a U-Sphere and seals him up. And he says, threat neutralized, and he gets on the comms to Batman and Terrific and says, guys, I think we just saved the day. Final panel, though, is a laptop showing Brother Eye. So what's going to happen in the last 4 issues? Something's going to make it so it's not a win. That's guaranteed. So, yeah, it's, honestly, I think these last, I'm going to say 4 issues, that seems about right. The Brainiac taking Manhattan bit, I think that works for me. I think overall that was a solid enough, like Superman's back, it brought all the heroes together. I think that all of the other subplots being put off to the side, like I haven't seen a grifter or 50 Sue in a hot minute, and I'm grateful for that. Thank you for focusing on what matters. I'm curious to see how they're going to tie back in these last few issues, whether or not it's going to matter at all. So yeah, no, it's honestly, these last 4 issues have been great. I like the way that this was wrapped up. I think it might have come a little bit too easy. The fact that they just shrunk Brainiac, like this is a god level Brainiac we're dealing with here, and he's just shrunken down by the Atom. That seems a little bit too easy, but I'm willing to accept it because it then pivots and switches attention to, and this is how Brother Eye comes to be, which is honestly the point of the whole story. So kudos to tying it in naturally there. Overall, going to give this one just a flat 7. I think there's some good moments to it. The punching of Brainiac looks good. There's also a few moments when like Tim is talking to Terry that also works. So yeah, no, it's a 7. It's managed to gain a little bit here right at the finish line. Let's see what they do with the last 4 issues though. Earth 2 World's End, written by Bennett, Wilson, Johnson, and Bunn. Art by literally everybody who can handle a pencil. So this issue picks up with Alan Scott getting the powers of all the different kingdoms or avatars or whatever you want to call them. And they're like, they live within you now. You carry them on. And immediately Alan's like, what about Sam? A memory's not the same as the real thing. And they're like, no, like you literally carry them in you. They live inside there. It's not a memory, it's literal. And so Sam pops out and is just like, hey man, you can do it. I believe in you. And Alan's like looking at the size of Apocalypse and like all the craziness of it. And he's like, oh, this seems like a lot, but I don't, whether you're the real Sam or just a memory, whatever, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm gonna fight a god planet. And he just starts blasting energy at it. We then go, well, we get a little bit more with Alan beforehand where he feels the entirety of the planet and like he's taking on all of that energy and he can feel it's like a tug of war that's tearing the planet apart. So then we go back down to Kalibak and Barda, who's just fighting through the World Army, and it's just no contest. They're just absolutely like destroying everybody. However, all of a sudden they are interrupted by Jimmy Olsen, who comes in and says, Barda, you've betrayed your friends and you suck and whatever power you've got, you don't deserve it. And Barda's like, Jimmy Olsen! Oh god, he's different from everyone else, Calabac. We have to destroy him quickly. And she launches after Jimmy, and Jimmy just knocks her down and apparently takes away her armor. And he's like, what have you done with my armor? And Jimmy's like, I am one with the mother box, and we're taking back your power. But then Calabac tackles him out of the air, starts punching him, and notices that as he starts bleeding, it's like this bright crystalline white. And he's like, oh, the boy is made of god flesh. He is a new god now. What does that mean? I don't know. So, the last issue or the issue before, the secret spaceship, the Endurance, that Terry Sloan and crew were on, got blown up. This issue, we see that it did get blown up, but then out of a dimensional pocket comes the ship again. And they give an explanation here that apparently Terry Sloan made a bunch of the exact same ship in a bunch of different universes. And when they were going to blow up that one, he just swapped it with another universes, and that's the one that they blew up. And so Mr. Terrific's like, all right, I'll admit, I'm impressed, but now it's my turn to impress you. We don't see what he does. So then we go down to Adam's Haven, where Red Arrow, Huntress, and Batman have just arrived, and it's like, oh god, this is awful. Everything's going to hell. And they're saying everyone's below ground with the escape ships. And Red Arrow's like, this is not the way that Bruce imagined the end of the world. This is, I'm not sure. Look, they already destroyed the moon and now they're blocking the sun. Like, I'm not sure there's any chance we're going to be able to escape this at all. But then Commander Sato pops over the comm and is like, hey, Huntress, glad to have you back. Yeah, Power Girl and them are up there in the stratosphere. Don't worry about it. We do have a bigger issue where the evac ships have all been taken by somebody named Brainwave. If you can do anything to help out with that, we really need those evac ships back. And so Red Arrow and the rest of the crew's like, okay, let's do it. So we cut over to Brainwave, who's controlling everybody, except for Dick, who's just looking for his son. And mind you, he gets him. Grayson actually manages to get up, and he finds his son, and he's like, Johnny, can you hear me? We're getting out of here. And he picks up his son, throws him over his shoulder, starts walking away. And Brainwave's like, I don't know who you are or why you're immune to my powers. And he does like a little brain scan. It's just like, oh, you're just naturally immune. Okay, whatever. Well, the point being, I am Brainwave. I control all these people, and we are going to get them off of this crumbling rock into space, and I will be in charge. And then Obsidian and Johnny Thunder come in and are just like, we didn't agree to that. And then Brainwave just takes them over and just like, well, now you did. So at that point, Ted Grant shows back up and he pulls a gun on Dick. And Dick's like, Ted, what are you doing? He's like, I can't control myself, kid. And as Dick is about to be attacked by Ted, Brainwave gets hit by a batarang, and in comes Batman, Huntress, and Red Arrow. They immediately lay the smack down on Brainwave, so everyone gets snapped out of it. Dick picks up the batarang and just like, oh man, this is so cool. And then as everyone's like, oh hey, what's going on? All right, the Earth is ending. Every man for himself, get on the ship. So they all start like rioting to get on board. And then Huntress is just like, wait, all of you, hold on. And then Dick, who just had his son slung over his shoulder, has lost his son again. And he's like, Johnny, where are you? So then we go to Power Girl, Valzad, and Red Tornado up fighting against the satellites and stuff like that coming down from Apocalypse. And they get a call from Sato, who's like, hey, stop attacking the satellites. We just, like, it's not doing enough. We're leaving the planet. We're not even going to try to save this place. We need you to attack Apocalypse to buy us some time. And they're like, awesome, can do. But as they fly up closer to Apocalypse, they see this little green shield thing that's holding back the entirety of Apocalypse. And Valzad's like, I told you fighting wasn't the answer. That's our alternative. As they go up and they see Alan Scott, who's holding back the entirety of Apocalypse. And they're like, hey, buddy, we're here. How do we help you out? And he's like, what? And then all of a sudden he like loses concentration. Apocalypse immediately starts bearing down on them again. He's like, you're too late. That was literally all of our planet's energy. Like, I just used all of the energy left in order to just do that. And now it's coming down again. So we're doomed. And that's the issue. Look, I've said multiple times now the idea of like, they need a win They just need every once in a while a little bit of a win to say, okay, that's it. Like, we can at least do something here. This issue had 1 or 2 wins. I'll give it that. It had the win of, okay, Alan Scott has the powers, and also Terry Sloan actually saved the ship. Maybe you can count Dick Grayson finding his son, but then counteract that with Alan Scott got the powers and they ended up being useless, and also Dick Grayson lost his son again already. So, like, it's just a constant turnaround of, like, mild victory, crushing defeat. And I understand that's the point of the book. I get it. But it doesn't make it a satisfying read. It just makes it a constant stream of, like, oh man, this is just torture porn at this point. So, is it a bad issue? No, I think it's actually one of the better written ones, just in terms of it's starting to wrap things up and condense people into singular plot lines. So I'm good with that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm waiting for this to end. That's more or less the gist of it, is that this book has gotten to the point where we've established there's no saving Earth. We established how the people are going to be saved. Now we're just spending, for some reason, 4 issues getting there, which it feels like it could easily be done in 2, if not less. So for this issue, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 6.5, but the rest of the series, we'll see how we manage to stretch this out over 4 more issues. And that's it. That is all the comics that came out from DC Comics this March 4th, 2015. And all right, we gotta talk some brass tacks here. We gotta get down to business. So, looking ahead on the schedule, once we hit Convergence, once we hit next month's books, from then until the end of the show, it's smooth sailing. There might be 1 or 2 little hiccup months here or there, but for the most part, it's super easy. I think some months only have like 7 comics. I'd say months, weeks. Some weeks only have 7 comics coming out. It's very light. However, this month they realized, oh crap, we need to get everything out the door before Convergence month. So therefore, we're going to stack one of these weeks. So looking at the next 3 weeks coming out, we've got 11 comics coming out next week, 12 comics coming out the week after that, both very manageable, and then 19 comics coming out the week after that. One of which is Secret Origins, a triple-sized anthology book, and the other is Multiversity, which is already the densest thing you will read this year. I cannot feasibly do that all in one episode. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 3 books from that week and put them in next week's episode. I'm also going to take 2 books from that week and put them in the weeks afterwards. So collectively, every week is going to have 14 books in them, okay? Downside, I decided this about 30 minutes ago, so I don't actually know which books I'm going to take and move yet, but lo and behold, I promise you, they won't be that important, if that makes any sense. They are going to be lower tier books, so that way you don't have to worry about, hey, why aren't these in the episode they were supposed to be in? It's because they don't matter. Stop worrying about it. So I'm going to tell you the 11 books that are coming out next week, and then just know there's going to be 3 after that I haven't decided yet. So, those books are, in no particular order, Action Comics, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League United, World's Finest, New Suicide Squad, Constantine, Clarion, and our 3 weeklies, Batman Eternal, World's End, and Future's End. However, there is also one more book that I skipped over, which is kind of a special book. It is Detective Comics Endgame. So for anybody who's keeping up with the main Batman book by Snyder and Capullo, Endgame is going on in that. It spawned 4 different one-shots, I believe. Maybe only 3. But the Batman Annual is also an Endgame tie-in. So it's a bit hit or miss how you want to define that. Regardless, this is the first one of them. It's kind of spinning out of Detective Comics, but it's also its independent thing. We'll be covering that next week, along with 3 other comics that I haven't decided yet. So yeah, I'm getting fast and loose with this show as we approach the end. I'm willing to bend some rules. I'm willing to break some rules as well. Mind you, they are all self-imposed rules. I could break them at any time, but I've decided to wait 5 years because screw you. Anyway, that is literally all the books that are coming out. If you have any thoughts on any of the comics I talked about this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and leave them down in the comments beneath the YouTube video if you're watching that version. But if you're listening to the audio, we have some social media platforms. We have a subreddit. We have a Discord. We have a Patreon. We have some other stuff, probably. Or you could just go to YouTube. Like, I'll find you there. You can easily post there. That's kind of the default. Why aren't you checking us out there? What, are you listening to us while you're driving? While you're working? Your boss notices. They can see your productivity lowering because I'm sitting here ranting at you. Get back to work, Steve. Anyway. Yeah, no, it is literally midnight the night before this needs to go up, and I am completely out of it. But thank you for sticking with me through my ramblings. If you have anything you want to say, leave a comment. I already did that whole bit. Yeah, no, I'm done. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to tune in next week. Be sure to leave a positive interaction with whatever platform you're listening to this on. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.